Hello BookTube, my name is Sarah and welcome to my channel. Today I'm coming to you with my January 2018 wrap-up. So, I'm not going to talk a lot about all the books that I read this month. I did talk at length about all of them in my weekly wrap-ups, so I will leave links in the description box below to each of my weekly wrap-ups that feature these books. And if you're interested, you can go and check out more of my thoughts on them because I don't want this video to be horribly long. So to start off with, let's start off with my reading stats for the month. I read 19 books this month. My Goodreads goal, I am 3 books ahead of schedule. So I'm at 10% of my challenge completed, which is fantastic. So I read 2 3-star books, 7 3.5-star books, 7 4-star books, and 3 4.5-star books. 10 contemporary romance, 4 historical romance Regency. I am breaking it into the time period for historical romance, but I am kind of lumping all the Regency, like those kind of books together, even though they may not have taken place during the quote-unquote Regency period. It's just a little bit easier. I read 2 paranormal romance novels, 1 cozy mystery, 1 chick lit, and 1 magical realism book. I read 18 adult novels and 1 new adult novel. I read 1 book published in the 1960s, 1 from the 1990s, 3 from the 2000s, and 14 were published between 2010 and 2017. 10 audiobooks and 9 ebooks. 17 novels and 2 novellas. This is fun. I just noticed this stat on my, because I do the Let's Read spreadsheet, and I just this morning, noticed this part of it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's kind of fun. So I read 16 books that were part of a series. Interesting. And 3 books that were standalone. So yes, overwhelmingly I'm reading series. Now, out of those 16 books that were part of a series, 6 of them were new series that I started, and 10 of them were ongoing series, so that's a good thing. I read a grand total of 5,564 pages, which works out to approximately 179 pages a day, so really, really good. And some challenge stats, too. I completed my RRC January 2018 monthly challenge with 10 out of 10. For my RRC by the numbers challenge, I'm now at 20 out of 35 books completed. I don't think I'm going to complete that challenge in full. That one will be done, I think March 14th is the last day for that one. And the books that I'm missing are books that have 6 and 7 words per title. And that's kind of hard to find. And I was looking at my books that I'm reading in February, and really none of them fit into there. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to make that. That's okay. It's more, you know, having fun participating as it is to actually completing necessarily. The RRC Stacking the Series Challenge. I have completed 0 out of 10 levels, but I've gotten 2 out of my full 55 books completed. That one lasts all year. The A Million More Pages What to Read in 2018 Challenge. I've completed 1 task out of 25 and read 3 out of the 42 books required. And for the RRC Where Are You Reading in 2018, the one where I'm doing the different states, I've gotten 10 out of the 51 states completed. Now, you're probably like, well, there's only 50 states. They're counting Washington, D.C. as a state. So if anyone has any suggestions of books that take place in Washington, D.C., please let me know in the comments below so I can somehow fit that in this year. So let's jump into the books that I finished this month. As usual, I'm going to go from my least favorite to my most favorite. So starting off, we have Girl with Guitar by Casey Quinn. This is the first book in the Kylie Ryan series, and I gave this book 3 stars. This one was okay. I didn't absolutely love it. I will still continue on with the series. I had a lot of issues with the underage drinking and the sexual content in this book. The main character is of legal age. Well, not to drink, but she's 18, so she's not, you know, a teenager. But I still felt it was a little too mature for an 18-year-old. And not for an 18-year-old to necessarily read, but it just didn't sit well with me, a lot of the things. The next book was Discovering Pride by Jill Sanders. This is book number 2 in the Pride series. Narrated on audio by Tanya Ebby. I gave this book 3 stars as well. This one was a good story. I enjoyed it, but it was not extremely memorable. So that's why it got a lower star rating. Next one was Reckless by Anne Stewart. This is the first book in the House of Rowan series, and it was narrated on audio by Susan Erickson. I gave this book 3.5 stars. This was a historical romance. It was very, very dark, a little depraved. They talked about some things that kind of made your skin crawl just a little bit. Not stuff that the characters themselves were actually participating in, but the fact that it was brought up that potential other people in these situations might be doing didn't sit well with me. The next book is Happy New Year, Baby Fortune by Leanne Banks. This is the first book in the Fortunes of Texas, Welcome to Horseback Hollow series. I gave this book 3.5 stars. Again, much like Discovering Pride, this was a really cute story. I did enjoy it, but it wasn't extremely memorable. Next up, Kids on the Doorstep by Kimberly Van Meter. This is the first book in the Home in Emmett's Mill series. I give this book 3.5 stars. This was a really great story. I wouldn't necessarily classify this one as a romance. The romance almost came in as like a secondary plot. This dealt with a lot of difficult subjects like child abuse and child neglect and alcoholism and drug abuse and things like that. And it dealt with them very, very well. But they were very heavy topics for a book that you might not consider to be one that is that heavy, if you will. The next book is The Cat Who Turned On and Off by Lillian Jackson Braun. This is book number 3 in the Cat Who Mystery series. And I gave this book 3.5 stars. I love this series. I love these books. This one was adorable. This is the one that was published in the 1960s, so you almost have to take it with a grain of salt in the way some of the characters of any kind of minority or even women in some cases are portrayed or talked about. But it's still enjoyable if you take it for how it is, and don't be too serious when you're reading it. Highly enjoyable. I know I'm making it sound like it's bad. It's not. They're a lot of fun, but I have seen a lot of comments on Goodreads every time I read one of these books. I always like to read the comments after I've given my own kind of review, and a lot of people comment on the way minorities and women are portrayed, and I just wanted to speak to that very quickly. The next book that I finished the next in my list is When Irish Eyes Are Haunting by Heather Graham. This is book number 14.5 in the Crew of Hunters series, so this is a novella. I gave it 3.5 stars, and it was narrated on audio by Roger Clark. This one was really cute. It was 2 of the characters from a previous book. They're on their honeymoon in Ireland, and this deals with banshees and old Irish castles, and yeah, I really, really enjoyed this one. Next up, the other Heather Graham, which was The Forgotten. This is book 16 in the Crew of Hunters series, and I gave it 3.5 stars as well. Narrated on audio by Phil Giante. Really cute story, or not cute, I shouldn't use the word cute when I'm talking about like a paranormal murder mystery type romance. This one dealt with zombies and drug runners and smugglers, and the main character works at a dolphin research facility. It takes place in Miami, Florida, in that area. Really great story. Another great one in the series. You know how much I love this one. The next one is Red's Hot Cowboy by Carolyn Brown. Book number 2 in the Spikes and Spurs series. I gave this one 3.5 stars, and it was narrated on audio by Anne Marie Lee. Anne Marie Lee was a really great narrator. She does a brilliant job of doing that very Texas accent, and I found myself almost wanting to mimic it when I wasn't listening to the audiobook. This was a really great story. It was a fun little contemporary romance about 2 characters who start off disliking each other, but then end up really falling for each other. It's lower on the steaminess scale. There are some adult situations, but they are not very often, and nor do they go very graphic, which is always nice. But this is a really fun southern romance kind of idea, and I really, really enjoyed it. Next up was When He Was Wicked by Julia Quinn. This is book number 6 in the Bridgerton series. It was narrated on audio. The main book was narrated by Simon Preble, and the second epilogue was narrated by Kevin Brightening. I gave this book 4 stars. I love this series. This was a great book about kind of like second chance love, if you will. Francesca was married before, and her husband unexpectedly passed away, and, kind of finding romance with somebody else. It was lovely, and, I always say, this is a fabulous, fabulous series. Next up was Talk Me Down by Dakota Cassidy. This was book number 0.5 in the Plum Orchard series, so this was a novella, the prequel novella. I gave this book 4 stars. There was a lot that I loved about this story. Even though it was a little novella, there was a lot packed into it. I really liked the characters. I really liked delving into this world. Great, great contemporary romance, but higher up on the steaminess scale, if you will. Royally Matched is next by Emma Chase. Book number 2 in the Royally series. This was narrated on audio by Andy Arnett and Shane East. I gave this book 4 stars. Talking about higher up on the steaminess scale, this one is way up. This is the story of Harry, and he is now in line for the throne of a small fictional country, not unlike England. And he decides to do a bachelor-style dating show to potentially meet his future queen. It is a fun little romp. It's not a story that you need to take very seriously. The narration on it is fantastic. I do really enjoy this series. As I said, it's higher up on the steaminess scale, but highly enjoyable. Excuse me. Next up, Talk Dirty to Me by Dakota Cassidy. Book number 1 in the Plum Orchard series. This one was narrated on audio by Scarlett Chase. I gave this book 4 stars. This one was a really fun second chance romance. There are some great funny scenes in here. There's some wonderful characters in this book. It exudes Southern charm. Very small town Georgia, where they have, they're kind of set in their ways, and the fact that this, phone sex company is moving into their small town. A lot of the people who live in the town don't like that idea. And, of course, the story of the couple and them falling back in love. It's great. I really enjoyed it. Next is How to Fall in Love by Cecilia Ahern. I gave this book 4 stars. This was one that was put for the Pick It For Me challenge, and one I probably would have never picked up on my own. I loved this story so much. It's about a woman who essentially stops a man from committing suicide, which is a very dark subject, but the story does have its light moments, and she's trying to convince him, she has 2 weeks to convince him that life is essentially worth living. And it's absolutely wonderful. It's a great little love story, and yeah, I am now going to be picking up more books by this author for sure. Next up is Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman. This was narrated on audio by Christina Moore. I gave this book 4 stars. Actually, I just realized as I was making this list, or just when I was reading this now, that I think I bumped this one down to a 3.5. Doesn't matter. This was enjoyable. I didn't like it nearly as much as I liked the movie, but I still did really enjoy it. The characters were a bit different than the movie itself, which I know is going to happen, and I know it's almost like comparing apples to oranges, and I know I had a viewer comment on that, and I appreciate that, comparing it to the movie, but because the book and movie are of the same, the movie was based off the book, you can't help but want to compare the two, and I love the movie so much. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. The book will not end up being one of my favorite books of all time, unfortunately, but I did really enjoy reading it, and if you have not read it, I absolutely recommend it. The narration on this one was fantastic, so if you get a chance to listen to it on audio, definitely do that. There are a lot of nods to nods to things that appear in the movie, but of course they sensationalize things for movies a lot more than they do for books. The next one was The Chocolate Cure by Roxanne Snopek. This was book number 4 in the Love at the Chocolate Shop series. I gave this book 4 stars. I love this story so much. As I said in my my weekly reads, this is probably my favorite one out of the series to date. It was just wonderful and magical, and a great little romance between between two people who are dealing with a lot of issues, and yet they still manage to find each other and find love, and it's just great. I loved it. The next one is One Good Earl Deserves a Lover by Sarah MacLean. This was book number 2 in the Rules of Scoundrels series, and it was narrated on audio by Rosalind Landor. I gave this book 4.5 stars. Oh, I love this. I love this series. Again, these are really fun little romps, historical romance novels. She's very prim and proper, and he's absolutely a rake, and, the two of them still find each other. This one is higher on the steaminess scale, but still really, really great. Those scenes are very well written. There's some great funny moments in this book, and the narration on it was absolutely fantastic, and yeah, highly recommend. The next one is Wanderlust by Ronnie Lauren. This book I gave 4.5 stars to. This was a great rock star romance. She doesn't like or isn't familiar with the band, but she writes for a magazine and is tasked with following the band around for a week. And of course, her and the lead singer fall into a relationship. It was great. This book was a Rita Award finalist for 2017. If you are participating in the Romance Readers Readathon that Sissy and I are hosting, absolutely I recommend picking this one if you're looking for one of the ones on that list to pick. This is steamy. This is a steamy book, so keep that in mind. But it's still a really, really great story, and a lot of funny moments, a lot of poignant moments, dealing with some very serious topics like drinking and driving and texting and driving and things like that, underage drinking. But still, I mean, I really, really love this story, and I am definitely seeking out more books by this author. And the last book, and my favorite book of the month, was The Hostage by Susan Wiggs. This was book number 1 in the Chicago Fire trilogy, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. I am recommending this book to everyone, and I'm so upset that it took me this long to actually finally read it. Susan Wiggs, I have yet to read a bad book by her, and this is the story of a woman who comes from an extremely well-to-do family, and the night of the Chicago Fire, she ends up getting separated from her father and is kidnapped by this man who actually wants to kill her father. And she's taken from Chicago up the Great Lakes past Sault Ste. Marie, so it's some great geography and history in there, and it's pretty much she's being now held on this island called Isle Royale. It's a real place. You can look it up on a map, and so you can see exactly where it is up. I think it's Lake Superior. And yeah, this was just such a great, great story. I loved it, and I'm very much looking forward to continuing on with this series. So anyway, guys, that is it for my my monthly wrap-up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I kind of ran through the books rather quickly, but like I said, I've talked about all these books in my weekly reads, so if you want more information, please feel free to go and check it out. Check those videos out. In the thumbnail for each of those videos, I do have pictures of every book that I talk about, so be sure just to check the thumbnails out if there's a particular book that you want some more information on. Anyway, guys, that is it. Please let me know, did you read any good books in January, or have you read any of the books that I've talked about? And yeah, until my next video, guys, take care and happy reading. Bye.